Hey, everybody. I think we're up to the fourth installment of Everything Sad is Untrue by Daniel Nayeri. Thanks again for sticking with us and sticking with me and with the story. This story is a memoir about Daniel Nayeri's life, and it is told from the perspective of him as a fifth grader. And we kind of go back and forth in time from his life in Iran before he moved to the United States and became a refugee in Oklahoma. He's had a pretty rough time of it in Oklahoma, and he's sharing some of those stories right now with us. So we'll continue. When you enter the apartment complex, it feels like entering the courtyard of a dead king and his decaying cement kingdom. You can hear the people shout at each other through the windows. There's nothing breakable that isn't broken. In open areas, Dwight and his brothers play football. If they see me, I can't run straight for our door because I'm alone, and maybe they just push me inside and start hitting me where nobody could see and take my Nintendo. So if they see me, I run to the gas station across the street and wait till they get hungry and go inside. The gas station has comic books, so I can pretend I'm looking at each one really close because I'm a shopper. I say, "Hello, where are your comics?" So the attendant knows I'm interested and have money. He says, "Over there," and I say, "Ah, perfect." I don't go near the candy or the attendant will think I'm stealing and kick me out. The next closest protection is the emergency clinic, but they won't let me hang around there anymore. The greatest American hero is Logan Wolverine, who is also an immigrant from Canada and who can heal from anything. If I ever get one, I'll buy his comic book first. When Dwight and his brothers go inside, I run to our door. My mom works in the mornings and then goes to Oklahoma University at night to get another master's degree, an American degree that she can use here. My sister has a million after-school activities so she can get into Harvard. Ray, while they were divorced, wasn't around. Then after they got married again, he would be at work and at a bank till really late. So I turn on the lights in the kitchen and the two bedrooms and even the bathroom. Then it feels like people are around. I can cook all kinds of things. My top dishes are eggs with stewed tomatoes and onions on pita bread, tuna salad mixed with egg salad, also on pita. Most days, my mom has a cartoon of bean sprout. Most days, my mom has a carton of bean sprouts waiting for me. I get out a pan and put it on high heat. Then I put a chunk of butter in there. It has to be so hot the butter melts right away. I let it bubble, then drop the whole carton of bean sprouts. They make a giant sizzle. I can move the pan back and forth like a chef so the sprouts turn without a spatula. So I do that. When the sprouts are starting to shrivel, I pour in a bunch of soy sauce. It sizzles again, then turns the sprouts brown. That's my specialty. It might be a Japanese dish. I don't know. I eat a whole bowl of sprouts and watch TV for 3 hours until people get home. My mom comes home exhausted every night. I've never seen her not exhausted. And also, I've never seen her not working. People in Oklahoma think this must be how refugees are. Never sitting, never sleeping, like they have no knees and no dreams. Maybe people think that's just the way my mom talks, kind of panicky and chipper at the same time. Like someone scared who doesn't want you to think she's scared, even maybe like you're the one she's scared of. She is only as tall as a houseplant. Her eyes are almond-shaped, which is the Persian shape for eyes. She comes home and goes straight into the kitchen. I don't mean that she comes home, goes to her room to change clothes, wanders into the bathroom, picks through mail, and then finally arrives at the refrigerator. I mean she walks through the door, drops her bags and coat on the chair by the door without stopping on her way straight into the kitchen to start cooking. She's probably the best mom in my whole school. Sometimes I walk out of my room and don't even know she was there. She says, "Hi, baby June. Did you do your homework?" I say yes, even though I do all my homework in the time at the beginning of class while the teacher takes attendance and tries to get everyone to be quiet. Then we eat a big feast. My sister will be home by then too, and we get plates of buttery rice with beef chunks and kidney beans stewed in green onions, mint, and parsley. My mom takes the yogurt she makes herself and cuts cucumbers into it with salt and pepper, and she bakes bread, real bread, to dip into it. And she has jars of mixed pickles. And she grows radishes. And for dessert, she has fried dough balls and rosewater syrup and baklava and saffron cookies stuffed with cinnamon, sugar, and walnuts. All of it she baked over the weekends. And she brews black tea. And none of it is from cans or anything. We eat as if we're the Shaws of Oklahoma City. She asks if school is fine, and it's easy to say yeah with a mouthful of cookie. This is the best part of the day, and the only time I think my mom is happy. We leave the table when Ray gets home and pretend it's so we can do homework. My sister works on her business plan, and I play Final Fantasy. If they get loud in the kitchen, I turn the volume up. If Ray isn't mad, he'll put on a Van Damme movie and show me kicks. Or everyone goes to bed, and I hide under my blanket reading The Hobbit. I stay up as long as I possibly can so I can be alone. I stay up until my eyes hurt. The second I close my eyes, it all starts over again. I hate waking up. I stay up so late that I always sleep past the alarm clock and miss the bus. And that's it. That's a whole day. If you're a kid who's counting the memories of your grandpa's hands and your dad's laugh and a whole country full of different flower smells and birds you woke up to and your grandma's craggy face, geez, you could barely even picture it. And all the words to a language people think you made up, then all the days you spent getting beat up in Oklahoma aren't even worth collecting. So you can keep this one if you want to. Oklahoma is beautiful sometimes. People who are kind and feed poor kids are always beautiful. It depends on how you imagine the state shape. Either it's a soup pot sitting on a fire with cozy steam lines coming from it, from the soup that someone in church will share with you like this. Or if you draw the line straight, suddenly it looks like a cleaver cutting into something soft like this. In the maps, they don't draw the extra line, so you don't know which Oklahoma is which. But first, there's this poem from Rumi that my dad says sometimes. It's important. It goes, "That fly sailing on a leaf of hay on a sea of donkey piss raised his head, a sea captain." Obviously, the best thing to be in that story is the donkey. But if not that, then the fly, who is an adventurer of new lands and not a refugee. But definitely don't be the Pea River, and definitely don't be the leaf wallowing in it. Okay, this is the story of how my Lionheart mom got a death warrant on her head and had nowhere to run for a while. Those were all Van Damme movies, by the way, where lots of people die. Get yourself ready. Go poop now if you have to, because I won't pause the movie if you have to go in the middle. If I started when Ellie moved to London and decided to become English, that's when it started. She colored her hair to be lighter and never spoke about Armand and drank tea with her pinky up, and she didn't say their names. But just because they don't have something in English doesn't mean they don't have it in England. Know what I mean? She couldn't escape the memories and maybe never left her seat in the train station for the next 40 years. It goes like this. By the time Aunt Sanaz turned 19, she spoke English like a proper Disney Princess Diana. If you can express yourself super well, show people who you really are, that you're just like them, then they might love you. So Sanaz met an English guy who was so handsome and clean that Grandma Ellie cringed when he shook hands with my dad, who, at that time, was just out of prison for buying enough opium to give an entire village of sad people. When this happens, I'm 3 years old. My sister is 6. We both have auric strategies for each other already. My mom and dad were both out of medical school and had already moved to Isfahan, to the house I told you about with the jasmine garden and the birds in the walls. Sanaz and Charles are Finnegonzon and Finnegons. They want to get married. We bought plane tickets. England was the first time I tasted peanut butter. My sister almost lost a finger, and my mom met Jesus. All three were life-changing. First, I will tell you about the peanut butter. London was a cold city, paved with wet stones. When we arrived at Ellie's apartment, she opened her door and said, "Cosi," and squeezed my cheeks into paste. Everyone screamed and hugged. My dad was wearing a long overcoat he bought in the airport of England because he had never needed a coat that thick before, with a wad of cash as thick as a peanut butter jar. He carried the giant suitcases into the entryway of the apartment, plopped them onto the ground, and said to Ellie, "Where do you keep the knives?" This is what happened. My dad approached the suitcase like his dad approached the bowl. My mom said, "Masood, what are you doing?" No answer. The suitcases, I should tell you, were a set from one of those expensive fashion stores that Oklahoma rich people drive to Dallas to shop at. In the airports, the attendant had lifted them and said, "Wow, beautiful." When we got to my grandma Ellie's, my dad took the big suitcase to her room. The suitcase was big enough for me and my sister to fit in. He unzipped the top. Inside were all my mom's clothes and things for a 3-month visit. "Masood," she said. "Hold on." Dad picked up the suitcase and turned it over on the bed. Everything fell out in a pile. My mom sucked her teeth because that would be such an annoying thing to do. Then my dad took the knife and stabbed it into the suitcase. He cut all the way around, then ripped open the inner lining. Underneath it was a hidden compartment. My dad turned the suitcase over again and poured out a bunch of brick-shaped things wrapped in red plastic bags. He did this with the entire suitcase set, something like a few $1,000s worth of luggage, cut them all into bits. Poured out a whole river of red bricks. Apparently, he'd paid a tailor in Isfahan to sew them into the lining of the super expensive suitcases so the guards at the airport wouldn't think to inspect them. The red bricks were drugs, I found out later when my sister told me this story. In fact, I don't even know if I was there because I don't remember what happened to the suitcases once they were destroyed. I guess they threw them out. The only part I actually remember with my own eyes is standing in a really nice German suitcase store in London as my dad shopped for a new set. I was really scared, I remember, and my mom wasn't there. Maybe they had a fight when she found out he'd smuggled drugs into the country. I just remember being scared. The shop had marble floors, huge glass doors with suitcases displayed like sports cars. The attendants all wore black and pointed their noses at the vaulted ceiling. My dad barely spoke English, but he walked into places as if he was returning to his castle. He nodded to the doorman and shook his head. The doorman nodded back. And suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to him. My memory is the back of his coat and a young German saleswoman laughing at every joke. At some point before the memory, he must have said, "Wait here, Kosi." I remember standing in the entryway next to a row of suitcases. I poked one of them, and it rolled on freshly oiled wheels. "Oh, no, no, no," said the attendant, lunging at the suitcase before it moved 2 inches. "No touching," she said, smiling but not smiling. But I had nothing else to do, and the attendant, maybe her name was Gertrude, realized I was just going to be in the way. "Would you like a treat?" said Gert. I looked at my dad. Back then I wasn't poor, so I could take things if people offered them. My dad nodded. You have to understand, when he nodded to me or the doorman, it felt like everything was okay and you were a good person and you deserved good things to happen. So I said, "Yes, please." Gert said something in German or English. I didn't know either language except for "yes, please," and a different person ran into the back of the store. The other one returned and gave Gert a package. Gert handed it to me. Her face was still in my face. She was kneeling. "Tantu," I said. She stretched her lips into a smile again and got up. "It's peanut butter," she said. I don't think she had kids or knew what to do with them. What she gave me was a sandwich cookie with peanut butter cream in the middle. I already told you I'd never tasted peanut butter before. It was the taste in my mouth when my dad said, "I take this set, yes?" And he handed Gert a stack of money as thick as a novel. It was so much that Gert laughed at it and put a hand on my dad's arm like she had to touch him. He didn't even care what color luggage he got. The peanut butter was super sticky. I realized it's for keeping kids busy and their mouths shut. I watched Gert skip behind the counter to stuff the money someplace. Her helper went into the back to get boxes, and a little river started to flow across the marble floor toward my dad. He turned around to say, "Kosi, you ready to go?" His mustache was turned up, but when he saw me, it fell. "Kosi," he said. Gert looked up and saw the river moving toward her luggage. It was pee, because I'd peed myself. It just spread across the floor looking for something to soak. Gert ran toward the nearest luggage set and pushed it away. The rolling bags scattered like pool balls, but they dragged pee with them and painted the floor with more of it. Suddenly, everybody started scrambling to move suitcases as the pea river chased them around the shop. Gert shouted for the helper. He doesn't need a name. None of these people need names. I never saw them again. They were all furious. They said stuff in German or English. My dad picked me up. He was embarrassed. I could tell. All the laughing was over. I still had half my peanut butter cookie in my hand, but I dropped it. He held me away from his coat. He pointed at the wet luggage and said, "I take this too, yes?" It's a funny story when he tells it. Everybody laughs, and it ends with 2 sets of luggage and a hilarious trip shopping for pants before we got back to Ellie's place. My dad always walked into every door carrying a mountain of gifts, and even when some of them were soaked in pee, everybody would be happy. Next, I will tell you how my sister almost lost her finger. This was 2 years before we lost our dad. By the time we got to Oklahoma, my sister had become hard and sharp, but in London she was still soft clay, and we were still friends. I would spend all the hours she was gone asking for her and saving half of my cookies on a plate in Ellie's kitchen for when she got back. Back then, I thought she was the smartest person I had ever met. Now I know she's the smartest person anyone has ever met. Trust me on this. I saw her when she was 5. She could recite 20 pages of the Persian history books our dad gave her. People thought she had a photographic memory, real grown-ups, not her family. She learned English, no problem. They put her in 2 schools at once in Oklahoma, just so they'd have classes hard enough. I've never seen her struggle to understand anything. Sometimes I would stare at her, and I knew I could see more inside her than anyone else, and all I could see was the whirring light complex of a supercomputer. Have you ever looked at the inside of a computer with the boards and the boxes like miniature cities? You can't see them working. There's nothing moving. You can't understand it by looking. It's too complicated. Anyway, that's my sister. She was a person too, but more and more she hid that part. She loved our dad more than anybody. I'm not sure she ever liked me at all for being born. When we went to England, we planned to stay for months. She was sick, so they had to find something to do with her. Everybody was busy. My mom helped with the wedding and went to Ellie's church and learned about Christianity. My dad went around the city meeting friends and giving them gifts in red bags. If anyone asked about him, my mom or Ellie would say, "He's a powerful man with many friends, lots of obligations." I don't know what that means. My mom once said he was just meeting other addicts and wasting himself. I went to parks with Ellie. And my sister, they put her in a daycare so she'd have something to do. Otherwise, she'd destroy stuff. She was cheeky like our dad, and when grown-ups were around, she'd say things no 6-year-old could possibly know, and they'd all laugh. But you couldn't leave her alone or her brain would overload and I would end up crying. So they had her in daycare in a neighborhood in London that didn't like new people. Looking back, they probably thought we were Muslim immigrants who were going to cram into Ellie's little apartment and cook smelly food and act un-English or something. One little kid at daycare would hit her a lot. Like, my sister would be sitting at a round table coloring, and he'd smack her in the head with a crayon. But when she'd cry about it, everybody was awkward because the kids' parents didn't really care and didn't want people like us in their kids' class. And the teacher was a bashful British lady who wasn't going to take sides. So people told my sister the kid probably liked her and that she should be nice to him, even though she should have pinned him down and made him eat crayons. Till one day the kid said, "Hey, Brownie, come here." They were in the schoolyard, and he was standing by the door to the kitchen. I should mention my sister is a genius, but socially, definitely not a genius. She walked over, thinking the kid was finally going to be friends with her. He said, "I got a secret. Want to hear it?" She nodded. He said, "Put your finger here. It's special." Don't ever listen to anyone who randomly says it's special instead of a real reason. My sister was suspicious, so she only put her pinky finger in the little space in the hinge between the door and the door jamb. The little boy ran over to the other side as if he was going to hand her a secret note or something. I think about my sister in that exact moment a lot. She's just 6, brand new place. She doesn't speak the language exactly. She's alone at school. Some kid pelts her with crayons, and everybody has given her bad information. Be nice, he likes you. But he doesn't. He hated her. Even in his brand new kid heart, he'd found the hate spot. And she's just standing there with a tiny, delicate finger placed in the hinge of a big wooden door. The kid is probably giggling like a villain. He's giving every sign that he's going to hurt her, and she is genuinely hoping he's going to play with her. It's beautiful how badly we all want love. It's tragic how bad we are at searching for it. "Closer," said the kid. My sister leaned forward. The kid slammed the heavy door in her face like, "Not welcome." It didn't even slow down. The hinge clammed shut and cut her pinky in half. She didn't even have time to scream. The noise at the door slamming was the only part that got the teacher's attention. She looked over from across the yard. My sister's pinky was dangling by a thin string of skin, a little river of blood pouring down her arm, over her dress, and onto her leg. My mom says that by the time she arrived, the only thing the teacher had managed was to put my sister's pinky parts in a mug of ice. My mom says my sister was standing by herself shivering. The kid was back playing with all the other kids who got an extra long recess because of what he did to my sister. At that moment, if you looked in her eyes past the tears, I bet you wouldn't even see the pain of a severed finger, but the shock of how cruel people can be and how stupid it was to put her finger in a door jamb, hoping for the best in somebody. And if you think my sister would ever fall for anything like that again, now that we're here in Oklahoma and lots of boys have the same way of showing they like you, then you'd be dead wrong. As my mom rushed her to a hospital to have her finger sewn back on, my sister hardened her expectations for the world into a tight ball. She cried most when she saw the needle that would sew it back on. My mom told her she'd never have to go back to the school. When my dad got back from wherever he was, he took her for ice cream, and then they all came back to Ellie's apartment. I remember that my sister went straight into the bedroom to sleep, and my mom cried as she told Ellie what happened. That's how my sister almost lost her finger. But I didn't just tell you the story for no reason. I told you because it was the start of everything that would come later. It was the first step of how we ended up in Oklahoma. And it wasn't even the weirdest thing that happened that day. I wonder sometimes if I had looked at the space under the door to the bedroom where my sister was sleeping, whether I would see beams of magic light shining from inside. Because when my sister opened the door and walked out a few hours later, she was suddenly happy again, as if everything was going to be all right. And when they asked her what happened, she said she'd met an angel. Believe me, I know how it sounds, but imagine you're 6 and you came home every day crying, begging not to go back to school. And the grown-ups just pat you on the head and say, there, it'll get better, but it doesn't get better, only worse. Until today, you got your finger chopped off in a door and everyone realized they should have let you stay home. If that was you, would you walk out 2 hours later into the living room where the adults are sitting at the table having tea and biscuits and kicking themselves? And would you tell them everything was fine, or would you milk it a little? The answer is you'd milk it so hard it would turn into butter. There is no reason to come out and say you're fine, but that's what she did. She said she was lying in Ellie's bed. By the door was a rolled-up Persian rug that we had brought with us for Ellie. When my sister woke up, she saw a man sitting on the rug. She didn't know him, but she wasn't scared. When she described him, kind eyes, brown hair, a glow like a TV in a dark room, white robes, Ellie gasped and said, "Oh my God, you saw Jesus." And my sister said, "Yeah," even though she had no idea who Jesus was or what he looked like, because we didn't have pictures of him in Iran. He only said 4 words, "It will be okay," which is funny because that's what all grown-ups said, and it wasn't. Ellie was the happiest I have ever seen her. Maybe because it meant there would be another exile. "Your daughter's a Christian," she said to my mom, who was furious. "Yeah," said my sister, "I'm a Christian," because she saw it would make my mom twitch. That was the moment that everything started to blow up. It wasn't the bang. Maybe it wasn't even the lit fuse, but it was definitely the struck match, the flash and the spark that sent us flying across the world. And it was mostly absurd. Miracles are absurd by definition. If they weren't, they'd just be odd things that happened, improbable things. But while miracles are impossible, they aren't coincidences. They're knives that cut into our reality, and they're messy and weird. So all of a sudden, my mom had a 6-year-old saying she was a Christian, which, if you don't know, was a crime in Iran. Not a regular one either, a capital crime, the kind where if you're found guilty, they kill you. I suppose if you don't want to believe it, all you have to do is say my sister wanted to be like Ellie, or she wanted to harass my mom, both of which are true, or she was dreaming, or the pain medication for her finger made her brain wibbly. Miracles are easy to explain away. It doesn't really matter what you believe, because the point is that Seema, that's my mom's name, was forced at that moment to pay attention. She came to England unwilling to hear Ellie's or Sanaz's conversion story. When they arrived in England, they found a church that welcomed them, that made them Christians. Seema was a committed Shiite Muslim at that time, which meant, you know what, you're not ready for this. You kind of have to know the history of Islam, which Seema knew, and compare it to her experience in England as she heard about Christianity. Then you can compare the claims they make about truth and reality that we all share, but also mostly ignore in different parts, which is why we can see the same things but come to different conclusions about how to heal all our broken hearts, which we all have, which is such a big part of our lives that we don't even notice the pain of it. We're completely numb to it because it's constant. It's so true, it's boring, which is really our brains, terrified, hoping to ignore the fact that we have giant holes in our chests. That's why everyone is distracted with TV shows and no one likes to talk about it, our broken hearts problem. But we're going to talk about it soon, so gird your loins, reader. For now, here's a poop story to make you feel better. Or if not better, then at least distracted. If you want to know how rich somebody is, just look at what they eat and how they poop. Everybody does both, so it's not like comparing cars. Those are two things you can even compare with animals. So for instance, you could see some dude grab up a bunch of taco salad with his hands and shove it in his mouth like a bear and then go off into a porta potty on a construction site, and you know that guy is probably dirtier than the bear. Or you see people in Edmond who buy boxed cereal and bottled water, and you don't even know where they poop. Probably every bathroom in their house has a bathroom with candles and potpourri and stuff. No, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Probably every bedroom in their house has a bathroom with candles and potpourri and stuff. They don't even have to smell themselves. And if you're a king, you don't even have to wipe. Poor people get to choose what they eat, don't get to choose what they eat, and they don't get to hide where they poop. That's why we think of them as animals. So there's one aspect of pooping, being rich or not. But you can tell a lot about cultures too by how they handle pooping, because it's the other half of their cuisine. Korean food is the tastiest, but makes the smelliest poops. English food is pretty much the same in both directions. South Indian food is so spicy it burns on the way out, but it's worth it. Oklahoma barbecue takes its time and sits heavy in your belly for more than a day. Oklahoma Tex-Mex is some of the best food in the world, but the poops are soupy. Italy has a great taste to poop ratio, which is probably why so many people like it best. And I don't want to brag, but Persian food is the perfect balance of tastiness and on-time firm poops. That's because Persians are one of the oldest cultures in the world, and we make really nice rugs. So we had to make good strategies, or spills, both kinds, would be bad for the rugs. The bathrooms in Iran were so different that when I told Mrs. Miller's class about them, it was a disaster. Here's what I said. You walk into a room in your house and everything is stone or tile. What about your precious rugs? Said Jared M. No rugs, I said. What do the rooms look like? Said Kelly J. Normal, I said. Some people put flowers by the sink or framed pictures on the walls, just like Oklahomans so far. The difference is we don't have the chairs. What chairs? Said Jared M. The chairs in American bathrooms. We don't have chairs, he said. The chairs. The chairs, I said. The ones you go in. You mean poop? Said Kelly J. Yeah, the poop chairs, I said. Toilets, said Mrs. Miller. And then she spelled it on the chalkboard. I know how to spell it. I'm not a second grader. I just didn't remember the word. It's even the same word in Farsi. I just forgot because everybody was staring at me. Wait, said Jared. You don't have toilets? Ooh, said Kelly J. We have toilets, I said. They're just not chair shape. We have toilet bowls set into the tile floors. Sew a hole in the ground? You squat over them. They even have really nice inlay steps for your feet so you don't slip. Do they flush? Of course they flush everything away. We've had running water longer than the United States has existed. But you don't sit in the uncomfortable position where it feels like nothing will ever come out because your butt is squeezed together. Squatting is way better for you, with less chance you'll get hemorrhoids. I'd rather get hemorrhoids than poop on the floor, said Jared. I should repeat, it's not on the floor. The toilet pan is just set at ground level. Rich people have lots of colorful stonework tiles around it, like you're pooping into a little babbling river in a field of flowers. Sounds dirty, said Kelly J. Yeah, gross, said a different Kelly. Can we stop talking about this? No one really believed that bathrooms like that could be nice, and I couldn't find any pictures, so I dropped it. I didn't even tell the Kellys that the dirtiest thing I can think of is sitting on a chair that clogs all the time and wiping butts with dry toilet paper. There is zero chance all the poop has come off with that method. Think about it. If you get a bunch of peanut butter and jelly on your hands, like you squeezed a whole handful and now you're sticky, do you use a series of disintegrating tissues and pretend all the residue magically wipes away, even though your skin is basically a sponge with a billion pores all packed with peanut butter? Or do you just wash them with hot water? Because it seems pretty obvious to me that all the butts in Mrs. Miller's class are poop smeared and grosser than gross. But I hadn't said any of this when Jared said, "Wait, so do you wipe with leaves?" And I was so busy thinking about how ridiculous it is to have a basket of leaves in a bathroom that I said, "No, you don't wipe?" "Class," said Mrs. Miller, because everyone turned into howler monkeys. "Class, quiet down." "We wash," I said, "with soap." "And your hands?" said Kelly. "Of course with your hands. How do you shower?" "Yes," I said. "That is disgusting," everybody agreed. "It's like a bidet," said Mrs. Miller. "It's just a nozzle that sprays water. It's very hygienic." I said, "They do it in France." People like France, so that ended the conversation, even though the French kings pooped right in the hallways of their castles. I read this at the library one Saturday. Imagine you're a rich French person. Your dad had an oil company or something. You have a giant house somewhere in fancy France. One day you get a fancy invitation to the palace for a party to celebrate the king's new jacket or something. So you go. You put on your best outfit and make sure you smell great, and you pull up in front of the palace looking creamy. The party is like a party in the movies. Everything is a fairy tale. All the best food served by servants from other countries, flowers everywhere. Then the clock strikes 12 and the king yawns. He summons his minions to carry him to bed. People start to clear out. You practically float down the hall to the entryway. You turn a corner and don't forget, you've got your fanciest shoes on. You stepped into a steaming pile of budgy French poop. Right in the middle of a palace that looks like a museum. A big pile that only a person or a Great Dane could have made. It's all over your shoe. When you lift your foot, it makes a schlorpy sound. Some other party people walk past, but they don't even care. It's just you standing there with the poop. You're the only one who cares about it. Then the smell hits you. You'll never smell flowers or anything nice ever again. Thanks for coming. Hope you had a nice night. That's how Seema felt in England, as her daughter claimed to be a Christian just days before they went back to Iran. Because she knew no one else was going to stop to help. She had to deal with it herself before she went back home. Scrape it off her shoe or just keep going with it hanging on. Because if they found out, if the Comite found out, they would cut my mother's throat. She had to deal with it, even in the middle of her sister's wedding, in the middle of a vacation, when it was the last thing she wanted to do. The it I'm talking about is Christianity. And she was a very serious Muslim at that time, so she knew what I'm going to tell you. And she knew it was crap news. A history lesson. When the Prophet Muhammad died in the 7th century after he'd taken over most of the world, it was kind of a surprise to everybody. Suddenly, the messenger of Islam is dead. He just dolloped there in his best robes, and everyone's huddled over his breathless body, hoping he'll give some sign of what they should do in his case he dies. And the problem is, who's going to take over? The known world is at stake, and Muhammad hasn't left any instructions on who will inherit all the goats and the yogurt and the servants and the countries. His sons are all dead, so that's out. The other two possibilities are his cousin Ali and his right-hand man, Abu Bakr. You can imagine it could have gone 1,000 different ways. They're eyeing each other over his corpse and fingering their scimitars like it's high noon in an Oklahoma boomtown, except in the desert. Blood relatives versus the second in command. A tumbleweed whirls across a dune. The rigor mortis of the prophet whistles a gunslinger tune. The fate of the world shivers in a dry saloon. The gulf between them was big enough for a whole religion to fit into. Burying him was the last thing the two factions would do together. The pushing and shoving would start even before the wailing of the wives came down from the almond trees. Here's the issue. Islam was the third kid in the family. Judaism was the oldest. Christianity was the middle child. Then Islam. So the two groups were basically fighting over which sibling to act like. The Shiites were the ones who wanted Ali, the cousin, to take over because they said we should be like the Jews. The magic is in the blood, the people. So if the prophet had blood relatives, they were special. The Sunnis said, no, the new thing to do is like the Christians. Jesus didn't appoint cousins. He had the apostles and then later the popes. Popes were elected. They were the best person for the job. So the Sunnis followed Abu Bakr because he'd been Muhammad's best advisor. It was a fight between siblings, but if you know anything about fights, the ones in a family are way worse than the ones between strangers. The Sunnis and the Shiites went to war for hundreds of years until the Shiites, the ones who thought God wanted a bloodline, lost for good in the 10th century. But they didn't go away. They stewed about it. They knew they were right. For years, they would go underground, rise up for a few fights, then go back into hiding. It's no mystery why minorities have to hide and harden themselves. The smaller the army, the more it has to whip itself up into a frenzy. If there's only one of you, you have to hole up just to keep the world at bay. So the Shiites hid. They even pretended to be Sunnis if they had to. Nowadays, the Muslims who live in Iran and Afghanistan are the Shiites, and in Oklahoma, they call them the fundamentalists. This is all important, I promise. The main thing to remember is the magic. When people believe something, you can ask them, how does the magic happen? And what you're really asking is, what can I do to be happy? For the Shiites, there's magic in the bloodline of the prophet. You still have to submit to the rules of Islam, but it's sure nice to be family. The word for those people is Sayyid. It means master or holy one. And people who are Sayyid have these lists that go, Muhammad begat this dude who begat another dude who begat so-and-so. So they prove they were begotten by the prophet. They're closer to God because they pray to their great-great-great-granddad. They're pure. They get invited to all the best parties. Technically, Sayyidi are entitled to 1/10 of your money. But how many Christians do you know who give 1/10 to the church? And very technically, Sayyidi are the only ones allowed to be presidents. You can tell because they wear the green turbans. But of course, in the real world, if you're powerful, you can just say you're Sayyid and no one will say anything. Like if a big guy says he's good at video games, even though you know you'd gank him, you just keep your mouth shut. People lie, basically. But who begat you is a question with an answer only someone else can tell you. You're born, and when you're old enough to understand, they tell you whose child you are. You get claimed. That's when you're born again into something. Not the world, but the word, the family name. It's the most important thing about you, whose you are. It's more important than your race or religion. It's more important than what shows you like. It's the part of you that talks to itself so late at night that you're not even sure you're awake. It's the concentrated you, collected in a pool of genetic fluids, creative juice, carbonic goo, passions, past mistakes, memories of other people, opinions about sweets, the intense desire to visit Italy, habits, the smell of your fart, all together in a thick maple syrup of your human situation, your blood. That's you, the truest thing about you. To the Shiite Muslims of Iran, the Sayyid were religiously important because the blood in their veins was Muhammad's and the blood in his was God's. This is why it's unthinkable that a Sayyid would turn away from Islam. My mom, Seema, is a Sayyid. So is my dad. I don't think either of them was lying. My dad has a goat skin with all the family tree on it. He jokes that it goes all the way back to Shem. That's Noah's son. He laughs when he says it. When I was really little, I remember old people would come to our door to have me touch them, like I could give them a blessing or something, because I was a double Syed. Really, it was one lady this one time. I don't even know what it was about. I was playing video games when my mom called me to the door. The old lady standing there was little, with a crooked back and a black chador framing her face, so you couldn't even tell if she had hair. Her face was craggy like my Baba Haji, and in my memory, she reaches out to cup my face in her hands. Just like him, she stared into my eyes and smiled. I just remember that one thing. I never knew if either of them got what they wanted from me. I realized maybe those aren't even two different memories. Maybe I gave the memory of the stranger to my grandpa so he'd have a good one, or just blurred them a little into each other. I don't know. Knowing about yourself, about your family, knowing the name of a grandpa and saying it out loud so he can hear it, it's probably the thing kids in Oklahoma treasure most. They hide it, of course, the way you should hide your most valuable thing, but I bet they walk around with a treasure chest full of clear memories, and the chest has their family name engraved on it, and the chest is their chest. The memories are in their heart. Their hearts are full, I bet, full of something that isn't dripping away into nothing. A patchwork memory is the shame of a refugee. I don't even know if the strange old lady at the door was a relative or something. All I have is her touching my face. The rest is flushed and gone. Anyway, here's another poop story. I got invited to Kyle's house. First, I had him over for my birthday. My mom made a giant feast, but we also got chips for party snacks. His dad dropped him off and stood around the parking lot for a while talking to Ray. Ever since he came to America, Ray has been in Oklahoma, so he knows how to shoot the breeze. He said, "Is that the new Ford Explorer?" That's the nice car Kyle's dad has. Kyle wanted to go inside, but I stood around to watch. Kyle's dad said, "Sure is. Will the boys be all right with just the sleeping bags?" "They'll be great," said Ray. "Should I give him some money for anything?" I winced because Ray would be super insulted if Kyle's dad took out any money. "Oh, we'll be fine. Thanks for bringing him over." "You sure? In case they decide they want to go mini golf or something?" Ray was smiling at this point, but I could see his pivot foot was grinding into the concrete. "If they do, it's my treat," he said. I'm not sure if Kyle's dad even realized how mad Ray was, how much danger he was in. I think he really thought if the boys wanted to go mini golfing, it was as simple as getting in a nice car and going. Or maybe he wanted to know what the plan was. Like, were we going to stay inside and not go wandering around the apartment complex? Probably he thought it was dangerous to do that. Anyway, Kyle's dad thought about it with an innocent look on his face. He was a serious dad and everything, but he was standing in range for a spinning wheel kick without even knowing it. "Okay," he said, "thanks again." Ray relaxed. Then Kyle's dad said, "Come here," to Kyle and gave him a hug. He kissed his head and told him to behave. I think if I ever hugged Ray, he would flinch. Not that I ever would. Anyway, Kyle ate the chips, but the dinner didn't work. My mom made fezajun, which you probably haven't had, but it's delicious. "What is that?" said Kyle when she put it down. "It's chicken stewed in pomegranate juice and pureed walnuts," she said. "It's chicken," I said again. Kyle only eats chicken. His dad makes him chicken tenders 3 days a week. I told that to my mom, so that's what she made. "Why does it look like that?" he said. The stew is kind of a brown blob on a bed of rice, but it tastes amazing, I promise. It's really good, I said, but he wasn't going to eat it. He tried to eat the bits of rice that hadn't touched the stew, but there were only 6 or 7 of those. My mom said, "Do you want the chicken if I wipe off the sauce?" And he said, "No, thanks." I said, "What do we do?" to my mom in Farsi, and she looked at me like she was ashamed. She's the best cook in the whole world. Nobody has ever disliked her food. I couldn't eat if our guest wasn't eating, but guests never refuse food either. In Dubai once, my mom helped a poor lady and she gave us frog to eat, and I had to chew it with my eyes closed. But you couldn't say no. And anyway, Fessenjun is no frog. Even rich people eat it. If you get a chance, you should really try it. It's sweet and tangy, and the rice is buttery. Kyle cringed at it and said, "Smells like poop," which is untrue. It only looks like poop. But wait, that wasn't even the poop story. My mom ran out to the gas station and bought a box of mac and cheese. She made it for him, and he ate that, and we played Nintendo all night. So that was my birthday, but it meant I got to go to his house a few weeks later. In Oklahoma, rich people have nice things. In Iran, they have nice spaces. Courtyards and fountain streams versus sports cars and mounted screens. Kyle's house had TVs in every room, even the bathroom, and they all had cable. I didn't need to be dropped off because I could just ride the bus home with him. He rides bus 34, where everybody plays Game Boy or trades cards until they get home. At this time, my poop situation was stable. I probably wasn't even thinking about how a stomach is a balloon full of stew gurgling around behind your belly button. I was staring out the window at the tall oak trees as we drove by. In Edmond, the rich neighborhoods have all the old trees. There are a lot of Kellys on bus 34, by the way. I watched one of them get off in front of a house with 2 garage doors. A mom was getting out of a car with shopping bags from the kind of store that gives big square shopping bags. Kelly's mom looked exactly like Kelly if she spent the next 15 years crumpling the skin of her face and smoothing it out again like a sheet of paper. I still followed all the strategies for buses, so I stayed down and held my ankles off the floor while Kyle told me where he was in Final Fantasy. We never talked about our families, ever. Like, his parents were divorced, but his mom would come down from California and live with them on some weekends, but we never talked about that. That's what made us friends. Only when we got off the bus and I walked up the brick walkway to his door did I remember. "What?" said Kyle. "Nothing," I said. He opened the door and went inside. What I was thinking was I didn't have a sleeping bag. It's not that I forgot it. I just didn't have one. But you were supposed to have them, I think, at sleepovers. I thought if I could wait till he falls asleep first, then maybe it wouldn't be a big deal. Around then, my stomach started to feel swampy. But Kyle wanted to play basketball, so he called his dad to move the car. Kyle only had to ask once, and his dad came out of the house to do it. After that, his dad stood around with us. He put a hand on Kyle's shoulder. "How are you boys liking your classes?" he said. I said, "I'm getting straight A's," so he'd know I'm a good influence. Kyle's dad showed us how to make our jump shots go far. Then he went inside. I guess none of this matters to the poop story. I just thought it was so weird to be outside in the daytime with a grown-up. He seemed so unhurried. His work was over and he didn't have more work. Anyway, we went inside for dinner. Kyle's mom got home from the mall and showed us her haircut. Her hair was short and black and shiny. She had blue eyes and knew all the shows we watched. She even had her own Game Boy. I had never met a mom who caught her own Pokemon. Total Finneganzon. When she walked into the kitchen, we were setting the table. She dropped her bags on the big island and said, "What's this?" Kyle's dad said, "Dinner." She pretended to breathe it in and fluttered her eyelashes. "Sounds good. I'll have that." And both Kyle and his brother laughed, but I didn't get it. "So Daniel," she said, "how's your mom?" Good." Conversation is painful when you're trying to hide. When we sat down, Kyle's dad put a plate in front of me that had an open bun topped with a giant dome of hamburger chili. "Have you ever had a Sloppy Joe?" he said. "They're Kyle's favorite." I shook my head no, but here's the thing. Sloppy Joes look exactly like steaming, loose poop if you're not used to them. In fact, if you took the brown chunky chili and poured it over rice instead of bread, it would look a lot like Fessenjun. Pretty much identical, because most food is brown. But what was I going to do? Stand up and say, "May the shame that you heaped at my feet be returned unto your head thricefold, and unto the heads of your family and animals, for truly, truly your own favorite food is poop-like." No, you can't say that. That would be the least Persian thing to do. To us, being polite is way more important than telling the truth. So I tariff, which is good manners. Pick up the sloppy sandwich and smile and go, that's really good, really tasty. Looks a little like Fessenjun too, which is a positive trait. Fessenjun. The dish we had at my house with the chicken and walnuts and pomegranates, they look similar is all I'm saying. Of course they taste different, both wonderful and worth trying. Anyway, that isn't even the poop story. We had the sloppy joes, and Kyle's dad started to make ice cream sundaes with store-bought fudge. And by then, my stomach situation was a broken washing machine tumbling a bunch of sleeping bags full of mud. "May I be excused?" I said. And Kyle's mom said, "Of course. Is everything okay?" "Yes, very much so," I said. "I just want to wash my hands." "Sloppy Dan," said Kyle, which was a funny inside joke we all had over the dinner where we'd call everything sloppy. So I got up. Kyle's dad moved aside as I passed, and I realized there was a sink right there at the kitchen island. I said, "Ugh, I'll get the other soap," the bar soap. So I scooted out of the kitchen, but not so fast that my legs separated too much because I was feeling super lumpy. I heard his mom say, "The bathroom is to your right." And it was. The door was right outside the kitchen. I shouted back, "Thanks," but kept scooting because no way was that bathroom far enough for them not to hear. I pinched all the way up the stairs to Kyle's bathroom and closed the door, and that's when I remembered the problem. Remember when I described the difference between Oklahoma toilets and the ones in Iran and how obviously better they are because squatting is good for flow and washing is good for hygiene? The truth is that I never actually changed my poop strategy when I got here. The whole time I was in America, I never went number 2 anywhere but home. At home, you can put bricks on either side of a toilet and squat over it. Standing on a toilet seat is harder than you think. They jostle. I was trying to balance myself when I heard a knock on the door. "Daniel?" Kyle's mom. The last mom you would ever want knowing you don't know how to poop. "Are you all right in there?" "Yep," I said, hoping the volume would blow her away like a gust of wind. "I'm great," I said. "We have a bathroom downstairs," she said. "Okay," I said. The noise of the toilet seat clacking on the bowl made it sound like I was trying to skateboard or something. I tried to explain myself. I'm just washing my shirt. I got something on it." She said, "Okay, just shout if you need anything." I tried to hold it until she walked away. If you ever try to squat on top of a toilet, you'll probably realize that aim becomes a major issue, along with balance and not breaking the hinges of the seat. Almost everything becomes an issue because it's a super hard thing to do. But I did it, finally. I should say again that dry wiping is disgusting, so that wasn't an option. And I'm not an animal, so washing in the sink would be impossible. I tried to roll up a bunch of toilet paper and soak it under the faucet, but they dissolve into bits. Time was running out. My ice cream sundae was probably melted. She probably thought I was washing all my clothes or something. I had one option. I took off my socks, pants were already off, and turned on the faucet in the bathtub. This is how I handle it at home, but always before a shower, so a bunch of soap and shampoo will go after it and keep everything clean. The bath at Kyle's house was so loud it sounded like Niagara Falls. The water slammed into the tub. The pipes sounded like engines turning on. I caught the water in my hands to check the temperature and also hopefully to make it quieter. It was still cold when, knock, knock, I screamed, "Ah, Daniel, are you taking a shower?" Kyle's mom again. No, I'm washing my feet." "Did you get Sloppy Joe on your feet?" "Ha ha," I said. I don't think I was sounding normal at this point. "No." "Did Bree wet the floor in there again?" Bree was their little Pomeranian dog who wet the floor sometimes. "Yes," I said. "Maybe, yes. My sock is wet, so I just wanted to be sure." As I said this, I wet my sock, so I wasn't lying. Okay, she said, I'll just put your sundae in the freezer till you're ready. When the water warmed up, I got in and washed. Then I realized I didn't have a towel here and said a very bad word. I dried with toilet paper, which I flushed. And then I cleaned their tub with the cleaner under the sink, and then I put my pants back on. I bunched my wet socks into my pocket, which immediately wetted my pants, and finally I left. Bree was waiting outside. I petted her head. She licked my hand. It was clean, but it didn't feel clean, even though dogs lick their butts. I leaned down and let her lick my nose. Thanks, Bree, I said. So anyway, I'm good at sleepovers now, and you can have a best friend. You just have to tell them Bree wet the floor every time. That was the poop story. My mom was a Syed from the bloodline of the Prophet, which you know about now. In Iran, if you convert from Islam to Christianity or Judaism, it's a capital crime. That means if they find you guilty in religious court, they kill you. But if you convert to something else, like Buddhism or something, then it's not so bad. Probably because Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are sister religions, and you always have the worst fights with your sister. And probably nothing happens if you're just a 6-year-old, except if you say, I'm a Christian now in your school. Chances are the committee will hear about it and raid your house, because if you're a Christian now, then so are your parents probably. And the committee does stuff way worse than killing you. When my sister walked out of her room and said she'd met Jesus, my mom knew all that. And here's the part that gets hard to believe. Seema, my mom, read about him and became a Christian too. Not just a regular one who keeps it in their pocket. She fell in love. She wanted everybody to have what she had, to be free, to realize that in other religions you have rules and codes and obligations to follow to earn good things. But all you had to do with Jesus was believe he was the one who died for you, and she believed. When I tell the story in Oklahoma, this is the part where the grown-ups always interrupt me. They say, okay, but why did she convert? Because up to that point, I've told them about the house with the birds in the walls, all the villages my grandfather owned, all the gold, my mom's own medical practice, all the amazing things she had that we don't have anymore because she became a Christian. All the money she gave up, so we're poor now. But I don't have an answer for them. How can you explain why you believe anything? So I just say that what my mom says when people ask her. She looks them in the eye with the begging hope that they'll hear her, and she says, because it's true. Why else would she believe it? It's true, and it's more valuable than $7 million in gold coins and thousands of acres of Persian countryside and 10 years of education to get a medical degree and all your family and a home and the best cream puffs of Holfa and even maybe your life. My mom wouldn't have made the trade otherwise. If you believe it's true, that there is a God and he wants you to believe in him and he sent his son to die for you, then it has to take over your life. It has to be worth more than everything else because heaven's waiting on the other side. That or Seema is insane. There's no middle. You can't say it's a quirky thing she thinks sometimes because she went all the way with it. If it's not true, she made a giant mistake, but she doesn't think so. So she had all that wealth, the love of all those people she helped in her clinic. They treated her like a queen. She was a Syed, and she's poor now. People spit on her on buses. She's a refugee in places people hate refugees, with a husband who hits harder than a 2nd-degree black belt because he's a 3rd-degree black belt. And she'll tell you, it's worth it. Jesus is better. It's true. We can keep talking about it, keep grinding our teeth on why Seema converted, since it turns the fate of everybody in the story. It's why we're here hiding in Oklahoma. You can wonder and question and disagree. You can be certain she's dead wrong, but you can't make Seema agree with you. It's true. Christ has died. Christ is risen. Christ will come again. This whole story hinges on it. Seema, who was such a fierce Muslim that she marched for the revolution, who studied the Quran the way very few people do, read the Bible, and knew in her heart that it was true. We accept it like a yo mama joke. If someone says, yo mama's so dumb she sold her car for gas money, you don't say, yeah, but why? Was she properly aware of the long-term consequences? You just accept the premise that yo mama is dumb and we move on from there. Maybe you lay down some facts about his mama. My mama is not dumb, by the way. So when you're evaluating whether she's sincere in her belief or a lunatic, you should know she's got more degrees, speaks more languages, and has seen more of the world than most people you know. And how do you know anything for certain anyway? Maybe don't be so certain all the time. Here's something else you need to understand. Syeds don't convert. That's why I told you all that stuff, so you'd understand how mad everybody got. Being a Syed meant you were rich, but the blessing wasn't just in your pocket, it was in your blood. For Muhammad's kids to go against the family, for my mom to reject her own blood, another conversion has to happen from Syed to Najis. A Najis thing is a vile thing. It means ritually impure, unclean on a cellular and cosmic level. The halal food laws exist so Muslims avoid eating Najis things. Young boys throw stones at dogs because they are Najis and shouldn't be touched. Najis people can give you their uncleanliness just by touch. Old ladies would rather die than have you so much as breathe your stench on their teacups. To the supreme leader of Iran at that time, a Najis Syed would be a loathsome thing, a God-hater, a spoiled child, an insult to the Holy Prophet, someone whose badness is not even said what to do with. The supreme leader would simply write a fatwa, a law to have you killed and buried someplace far away and cold. I tried to explain being Najis to Kyle, and he said, like cooties. No, I said, almost nothing like cooties. Because there isn't a cootie shot for nuggles. And because they don't kill you if you have cooties. Okay, that's two things, but the rest is like cooties. And he's right, besides those two things. Seema was baptized just a few days after the wedding of Sanaz, her youngest sister, Ellie's youngest daughter. Ellie is the exile, if you remember. My dad wasn't paying much attention because he was busy tearing open luggage, removing the drugs, and buying new luggage. And my sister was getting her finger cut. And I was eating cat food. But if my dad had been paying attention, he would have been against the whole thing. In Oklahoma, on the phone, he'll tell me, "We should never have gone." To the wedding, I say? No, it would be horrible to miss the wedding. The church! The wedding was in the church. You know what I mean. I don't, but I don't say anything. He thinks it was religion that ruined everything. It was like walking up and your wife is a completely different person. Jesus this, Jesus that, and suddenly she takes my children and goes across the world. These are the parts of the conversation that feel like a video game. He's jumping around the topic, religion bad, ruined his life, and throwing a billion fireballs. Why do governments tell people what they can believe? Why would she take his children? And all the while, the giant lizard on the screen he's trying to avoid is my one question. Why didn't you come with us? If there's one thing to know about my mom, it's that she doesn't stop. And if you don't stop, you're unstoppable. As soon as we got back to Iran after the wedding, she joined a secret church with a missionary named Pastor Pike, who would one day, 3 days later, get his throat cut in the street like he was a mad bull. It was the committee who did it, the Comité. The secret police of the supreme leader of the new government. In our city of Isfahan, they were the shadows on every wall, the invisible claw of the supreme leader. They could do anything. Their sudden raids on homes would make families disappear. They tortured people to get information about who was breaking Islamic law, and anyone could be helping them. If the old lady across the street saw a satellite dish on your roof or a picture of the old king in your kitchen, you'd make eye contact with her on the way to your trash can, and you'd realize she had a hammer over your head. She could tell the committee, and you'd disappear. People suspected their own cousins and dreaded their own children. In the middle of assignments, teachers would hold up a picture of a whiskey bottle and ask if anyone recognized it. An eager 6-year-old might raise her hand and come home to find a ransacked house and daddy gone. You couldn't tell the committee members by sight. You couldn't smell the blood on their shoes. To be stared at too long at the market meant you were suspected. And so in turn, you suspected them. The committee was the supreme leader's best idea. It curdled society in its own fear. One day they would catch my mom and kill Pastor Pike, but for now they were lurking behind the curtains of every bathtub.